Hi everyone, Martha from Discovery Fabrics, and today we're going to talk about layering for your feet. So we have done videos and blogs, and we have answered questions about how you layer to keep yourself warm in the winter. But now we're going to apply that to your feet, and that may be an unusual thought because for most of us in our day-to-day lives, we probably don't need to layer up our feet. But if you are outside in the cold, or you are a person or a family and you find yourself spending lots of time outside in the winter where it's very cold, I'm talking minus 20 Celsius and colder, or winter camping, and you find that your feet are not staying warm, we're going to take this example through to the extreme and show you some tips that you can use to help keep your feet warm. So the first principle of layering is you need a base layer. So the same is true for our feet. If you're outside and you find your feet are getting cold, you may want to introduce a base layer. So just like with our body, the base layer's purpose is to wick moisture off your skin. So these socks are going to wick moisture away from your feet if they are getting warm initially. So this is just a very thin polyester sock. Usually base layer socks are polyester or merino. You can choose either one. The benefit of polyester is they won't actually absorb, the fibers won't absorb the moisture. Wool socks will absorb the moisture, but they are also a little bit warmer when damp. So you can use either one, they both work well. So first of all, a thin liner sock, and then over top of that, a warm sock. So this is an example of a nice wool sock. You can see it's got big loopy wool things on the wrong side to trap my warm body heat. It's a fairly thick sock. So one thing to consider, if you are wearing a nice warm pair of wool socks inside your nice, warm boots, they've been rated to minus 20 or 30 or 40, and you find your feet are still getting cold, it could be that your boots aren't big enough. You may need to go up half a size, because the more layers you put on underneath, if you start to squish your feet at all, then your circulation's impaired, and as soon as your circulation's impaired, it's harder to keep your feet warm. So that could be a consideration for you. Another tip I have for keeping your feet warm is to actually wear a long sock. So these socks go almost up to my knee. That keeps more of my calf warm than these do. These are a little bit short, so they're thicker, but they're shorter. So you could consider going up to a longer sock. If you are out now, this is more everyday wear, let's call these. Now we're gonna go into more of the extreme sock world. This is an ancient pair of Helly Hansen pile socks. So you can see it's quite big and unstructured, and the reason for that is they didn't want the sock to be at all constricting, like I talked about. They didn't want to squish your feet. It's got a high-loft fleece on the inside to trap lots of warm body heat. With a sock like this, you probably most definitely need to go up one size. I have a warmer version here. This one is actually 2 layers of Polartec 200 fleece made into a very similar sock. I wore these in the winter in the Yukon when I was doing some winter guiding.
So these two you actually could make yourself, whereas these ones are pretty much store-bought.
Exactly.
The base layer ones
are
store-bought.
These ones you're buying. These ones you could start to play around. And the key is, as you keep going up in a sock's thickness of fabric, you do need to kind of make a bigger and bigger sock, if that makes sense. So you never want to, as I've said before, squish your feet and make them feel constricted. So these are kind of big and poofy, but that's one version. Then I have a very similar pair that are a little bit taller. So again, trying to keep that leg warmer. Then I go up to...
These are fleece as well?
These are also a fleece. I don't think it's Polartec 200 fleece because it doesn't feel as nice as 200 fleece, but no. Yeah, it's
it feels dense and it's 2 layers.
Yeah, it's also 2 layers. Then I have these 2 pairs, and these are Polartec Wind Pro, okay, yeah. Wind Pro style. These ones, you can see they're 2 different lengths. This one goes all the way up and over my knee. So the reason why these are so long, if you remember the mitten video that we talked about, I talked about how your wrist is a big source of heat loss because the blood vessels are right at the surface. There's no natural insulation. In your lower limbs, the same is true for your ankle and the back of your knees. So most socks are going to keep your ankle warm, but most socks don't cover the back of your knees. So depending on the conditions, if you have got warm socks on, you've got liner socks on, you've got a warm boot, you've got warm pants, you think, but you still feel like your feet are getting cold, these ones that are going to put extra warmth around your knee keep that back of your knee area more protected, and that could keep more blood circulating down to your feet. So it's a possibility for you to try, and also they're just sort of fun to wear. And these are actually modeled off of this traditional pair that came from Iqaluit in Nunavut. So these are a boiled wool pair, and this is what many of the locals wear in their mukluks at -40 and below. So this is the wool version, these are a synthetic version, but modeled off of that. And then I have an example of the boot that was the most comfortable for me to wear when I was guiding in the Yukon. And it has a double liner system. So not one, but two of the felt liners. This is a Sorel boot if you're familiar with those. And the other thing that's interesting about this boot is that's how big it is. And that's my normal size. So for me to be able to wear thick socks and possibly layer, I needed to go up about 2 sizes in my boot. So that took a little bit of fiddling to figure out what was the most comfortable. I was working for a guiding operation, so I had lots of samples to try on to figure out the best size for me. But I'm not really joking when I say go up a size if you feel like you think you're doing all the right things, but your boots are still not keeping your feet warm. It could just be that they are not big enough, and you need to allow for a little bit of extra room once you've got all those layers on. And then the one final trick I have, and this really only applies to you if you're going winter camping or say to a cabin that doesn't have a wood stove. Basically, if you're in any kind of circumstance where you don't have a way to dry out your boot liners overnight, because they will get sweaty and that water will freeze overnight if you're in cold temperatures and don't have a heat source, is we would wear a vapor barrier sock. So this sock is essentially a glorified plastic bag for your feet. And it's a rubberized nylon, just an inexpensive rubberized nylon. So we would put on our liner sock, then we would put on the vapor barrier sock, which is, as you can see, quite big and baggy like a bag. Then we'd put on our warm socks, whatever we were choosing to wear for the day. Then we would fiddle a little bit to make sure that this was comfortable and not squishing our toes. Then we would put our boots on. And so your feet were hot and sweaty in these, absolutely. It was wearing a plastic bag on your foot, but the benefit of this was it kept your thick socks and your boot liners completely dry so that they could perform and still insulate you the next day because there was no moisture trapped in the air spaces. And then these, because they were just rubberized, we could flip them inside out, kind of wipe them off, and they would be dry immediately. And then with our liner socks, we just brought lots of liner socks so you could have a fresh pair every day. And that is how we could go on multi-day expeditions and still have nice, warm, dry boots to wear every day. So that's a bit of an extreme, but this idea of layering, it does work. So yeah, if you have had cold feet in the winter and you've been wondering why, maybe some of these tips will help you troubleshoot a little bit. And as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group, So Inspired by Discovery Fabrics. Thanks for watching.